Hello, everybody. This is Eric Vierthaler of Vierthaler Studios here once again, and I'm here for the next episode of Sit Down by the Fire. I'm here with my special guest. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Gene Fallaize. I'm a writer director of feature films.
Thank you. Thank you so much for doing that. And so I guess my first question is, what exactly sparked your interest in pursuing that?
I kind of accidentally fell into it, like a lot of people do, actually. In that, my first career, if you like, was in radio production. That's what I wanted to be when I was at school. I just wanted to be a radio presenter, and that's what I did. I started in hospital radio and worked through into commercial radio, and then worked for the BBC, and did that for a few years and kind of did everything that I kind of originally wanted to do. Worked for some of the biggest radio groups in the UK, and then I got an opportunity to work in television production. A friend of mine said, do you want to get involved in TV? And I was like, well, I've never worked in TV. I know nothing about television production. I wouldn't know where to begin. And it was just like, it's fine. It's just radio, but with just an added layer of vision. And that was basically it. So I then went on like another probably 5 year career in television production. Started in production itself, then producing a lot of live sports and entertainment. And that's what led me into film. In that I was already producing television at that point, and someone said to me, "Do you know, I want to get involved in production?" And it eventually ended up being Nick Love's film Outlaw with Sean Bean, Danny Dyer, Bob Hoskins. And do you want to get involved in that? And I was like, well, I have no idea about producing films. I don't even know what a film producer does. And they actually said, neither do film producers. It's fine. And so I thought, well, I'd learned earlier in life, never say no to an opportunity if it presents itself. So I did the same thing. I said, yeah, okay, I'll give it a go. And that's what led to my film career. Initially as a producer, and then as a director. So each time, each kind of transition that I've had, it's felt very natural, and progressive. And I do realize that I'm lucky to have fallen into it that way. But
Mhm.
yeah, it's just one of those. It's just part of the journey that I had into film.
Awesome. Well, I certainly greatly appreciate you sharing all that. And yeah, and as far as the having an opportunity handed to you, I mean, that's something that I definitely do relate to because recently I actually was in a country music video. And what is hilarious about that was that back when I was a teenager, like that, I hated country music with a burning passion. And it's really funny to imagine all these years later, I actually would be in a country music video, and
Yeah,
yeah, and so and yeah, and what you said, like it just nails it, like like it just really nails it so perfectly, like with what happened to me. I mean, just knowing that if I would have said no to that opportunity, I would have missed out on a lot. And especially considering that originally I was just going to be a background role in it, but then I was at the right place at the right time. And then the director spotted me and he asked me if I wanted a bigger role. I was like, well, of course I do. It's like, well, what kind of question is that? And then he told me, okay, you're gonna have a beer bottle smashed on your head, and you're gonna have a fist fight scene. I was like, bring it on.
let's go.
Yeah. Exactly, yeah. And so, life is just way too short. I mean, just go out there, take those opportunities, go do what you love, and most importantly, just have fun.
Exactly. I say it to people all the time. If there's an opportunity, you never ever know where it's going to go. And the very worst thing you can do is say no. It doesn't matter if you say yes and it's not for you. You can then go back to what you were doing before. But you'll just never know. And if so many times in my career or my life, if I'd have said no to one thing, they could have affected something, 10 things down the line. So, it's so important to be open to things, even if it's not where you planned on going. If I often think back, if I'd have said no to that first opportunity in television, I would be without a job, because realistically, since I was in that industry, radio production and presenting has changed massively, and now there's a
Hmm.
fraction of those jobs left in the industry. So I would have had no place in the industry. So it's being open to those things. When I started producing in film, a few times it was put to me about directing, and I kept saying no. I just wasn't interested in directing at the time. And actually, when it came to it, and I eventually said yes, I loved it straight away, and I've never looked back. I still produce, but everything I do is primarily focused on directing. And I do think if I'd have said yes a little bit sooner, how would that have changed things? And those are the things you think about, the ones that you didn't say yes. You don't worry about the things you did say yes to. You think about the things that you didn't. And it's really important. Just be open to things.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I mean, I also feel like Jamie Lee Curtis is a really good example of that too. It's because Jamie Lee Curtis actually got her start, like with her career, doing the original Halloween. But what's ironic is that she's been very, very vocal, saying how she's not a fan of horror movies. But
Yeah,
yet, but yet, but this is the thing that I do praise her for. Is the fact that she has said, yeah, horror is not my cup of tea, but yeah, if it wasn't for that genre, I wouldn't be where I'm at now. And it's,
absolutely. Yeah,
yeah, and I mean, that's something that I relate to, like about me being in that country music video. It's like
of course.
I'm more of a fan of rock music per se, but hey, and I mean, an opportunity is an opportunity, and yeah, and
Exactly.
it's just one of those things like where I feel like that you can get so lost into thoughts a lot, like about, oh, if this happened or that happened, and then this and that will be the outcome of it. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely it's definitely a very fascinating topic.
It is for sure. I say, realistically, as a director, even as a producer, and certainly for actors, it's the same. You can't just go after the things that you like all the time, because you'd be closing so many doors, and you don't know where those opportunities are going to go. You only have to look at someone like Cillian Murphy, who had, smaller roles initially in Chris Nolan's films, and then ended up as Oppenheimer. It might not be what you're looking for at the moment you're looking for it, but be open, because, down the line, that can pay off in spades. As directors, we don't always get the jobs that we necessarily like. It's not our ideal film. If we could make any film about anything, it might not be it, but it could be the thing that leads to the right one. And ultimately, you've got to take these opportunities, because you could be waiting forever and not get given the one. So it's being open is everything, really.
Oh yeah, certainly, yeah, and I mean, yeah, and I mean, going back to Jamie Lee Curtis, imagine if she would have said no to that.
Yeah,
Like, imagine if she would have said, "Oh, I don't like horror movies, so therefore I'm not going to do it." She would have missed out on a lot.
massively. Yeah, she's the first to admit that she owes her career to that film, a lot of her life, really. So it's so many things like that. So many examples of that as well.
Oh yeah, certainly. And so, out of all the films you have made, which one was the one that you had? Which one was the one that you had fun with the most?
Uh, I that's hard, actually, because I always like to maintain a fun set, because
Right.
at the end of the day, we are just telling stories. We are so lucky to do what we do. It is so easy to get bogged down with the production side of things and take it too seriously. But I do like to remind myself that we're just making movies. I often have this, in that nobody cares about your film as much as you care about your film. And I think it's important to remember that sometimes, because we can get it's an inherent thing that happens with all filmmakers and everyone in the industry. You can get a little bit kind of self-focused on the project that you're working on and its importance to the world, whereas actually, the world doesn't really care. You care, and that's the bit that matters. Though, as long as you care, you're going to go somewhere. So, I always try and maintain that sense of reality there and have a bit of fun. But in terms of something that was fun to do, I mean, they've all had fun bits. Whether it being stuck in a car in a green screen stage, or shooting on a plane that's very much still on the tarmac, but as if it was at 30,000 feet. So many gags, blood gags and murder gags and things like that. There's all sorts of fun things. I did do one short film early on when I started directing, because I wanted to be able to empathize with actors a little bit more about what actors go through in the process. And I once got given advice in that the best directors are ones that have had at least some exposure to acting. So I said, okay, I'm going to try and do something where I am performing, but I don't want to be me, or in a role that's close to being a human role, because otherwise I'm just going to be so aware and conscious that it's me. So I ended up doing this short film entirely in prosthetics that covered literally everything except my eyes and my mouth opening.
Wow.
Everything else I couldn't hear because I was prosthetics over my ears and everything. And the thing was, is it took about 4 hours to get it on in the morning, which meant having to go to set like this as well. But the problem is I can't wear contacts, and so it meant that I was having to go to set with full prosthetics, kind of looking like a burned version of Voldemort, but with my glasses on. I do remember that as being a highlight, because there's nothing threatening about Voldemort with glasses. So
Right.
yeah, that stuck with me.
Yeah, and and I mean, of course, it's not very often, like when you go on set, and then the director like is wearing full on makeup, and I mean, I believe that Ron Howard did that, like when he directed the Grinch, actually, and yeah, and people were
Yeah.
saying on set that when both Jim Carrey and Ron Howard like were side by side, nobody could tell who was who. But the one thing that could tell them apart, like, was Jim Carrey, just being Jim Carrey.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that.
Oh yeah, certainly, yeah. And yeah, and I mean, I can also imagine it must have been hard to direct people, like when they're trying to talk to you, but yet because your ears were covered up, and you probably had a hard time hearing them, like, huh, huh, huh.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't too bad because there was an earpiece fitted inside the prosthetics, so I could hear as long as everyone was mic'd up. And the once you're kind of in the zone, it's fine. I mean, I don't. I mean, you obviously you don't see yourself when you're covered in stuff. So it was easy to forget when I wasn't in character that I was still caked in all this stuff. So it would only be kind of when I walked past something, reflective, and I'd kind of catch a glimpse of myself and kind of remember, oh yeah, I look like that monstrous thing with glasses. So yeah, it was between the takes and things like that. It just felt completely normal. So yeah, it was just slipping back into that character. But I kind of needed that to be able to get into a character. Otherwise, I just feel like I'm me. Ever since then, I've had a little cameo in all of the films I do. I just kind of, my face pops up for a moment, Hitchcock style. But they're very much still me. They're very human characters. That it's just me dressed up, basically. So I never have gone back, all the way to that deep level prosthetics.
Nice. And I yeah, I mean, of course, something like that, like, is definitely a story that you can tell for the rest of your life. So
Yeah.
certainly, yeah. And so yeah, I also saw that you did a movie like with Kevin Spacey, and so I'm just curious, how exactly did that come about?
So that was Control. That ended up, well, it was actually a gap filler because we were working on another project at the time, and we had our lead actress in place for that. And she called me one day and she said she'd been cast as a series regular in Bridgerton, and she was really upset. She didn't know what to do. Obviously, Bridgerton's a big opportunity, but she didn't want to let us down. And straight away, I said, "Don't be ridiculous. You've got to do Bridgerton. Like that doesn't come about very often, and you can't say no to that. So do
Oh yeah.
Bridgerton. We'll be fine. We can wait." And that was obviously going to benefit the project and everything as well. So we knew then that we had about 6 months to wait. No, sorry, about 9 months, where we could just wait for her to do Bridgerton and come back, so we could either do something in that 9 months or do the unheard of and just take 9 months off and chill out and things like that. I absolutely wish I'd done that option and chilled out, but we didn't. We said, okay, let's just try and do something. We didn't know if it was going to be a short film or just something, just to play around with the time that we had available, just kind of keep our creative juices flowing, because by that point we've been in pre-production and development for a while, so we just kind of wanted to do something. And then um and it just kind of very quickly kind of spiraled out of control, really, into what became this feature film, where I had the idea for this self-driving car. And so I spoke to my producers and I said, look, we could do this with a really, really small budget. We can do it mostly studio, in a really short amount of time. And so they said, yeah, that sounds good. Let's go for it. So I started to write the script, still not knowing if it was going to actually go anywhere. But as I started writing it, I'd had Kevin Spacey's voice in my head, and we'd spoken to Kevin previously about another project. And that project wasn't right, but his team had said, if anything else comes up, we'd love to chat more. And knowing that this was a lower budget because of the time we had and everything else like that, we knew it wasn't going to be big. There was only a certain amount of time we could raise finance and things like that, which generally takes time no matter what project it is. So we knew we were
Right.
going to be limited. So we were like, okay, let's just see if Kevin might be interested in doing this voice role. And really, that was when it kind of changed, because I then knew, okay, I need to do this quite quickly, turn this script around to a point in which it's, ready to be shared with someone like Kevin Spacey, who's won 2 Oscars. There's two more than
Uh-huh.
me. So I was like, okay, let's do this quick. So I turned the script down incredibly quickly, horribly quickly, and we put it to Kevin's team, and hoping that he would read it, and expecting him to say thanks but no thanks. And we were really surprised when it came back that he liked the project and wanted to meet with us. And it was such a quick process from there, where it was a few days later, it had been arranged that we met with him in London, and discussed the role. He liked us, we liked him, um, and then where we were going to go from there. And it was literally only a couple of weeks after that where we did his recording sessions. And once we had Kevin's voice in this, we then had that to be able to play back on set. And it meant that our lead actress could kind of listen to the way he performed the role beforehand, and it would be able to kind of drive her performance. And so that was, we recorded his dialogue December 2022. So we shot the rest of it in January 2023. And the film was rushed through post production, and we sold the film in Cannes last May 2023. So yeah, from the first idea, September 2022, to sold in Cannes in 2023. So we did it in 9 months, exactly on budget, and it's performed really well. It's sold worldwide. So we couldn't be happier, really, for what ended up being a gap filler project. It kind of changed everything for us, and opened a lot of doors. So it's been a game changer.
Oh yeah, and I mean I can imagine so, and I kind of feel like that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, like about being handed opportunities, and I mean that's certainly an opportunity you don't want to have pass on by.
Absolutely, and it was, the timing was everything, because Kevin had obviously been through his issues, but by that point he'd been cleared in the US, and everyone was kind of holding off a little bit to see what the outcome was going to be in the UK. And we knew that it was going to be a finite time before someone else was going to jump on that. And really, we knew it was going to be the first one to get Kevin involved that was going to benefit from it. As soon as there's no prizes for second place when you come in something like that. And so we knew we had to move fast, and it wasn't just a snap decision. We discussed it with the producers and with our executives just to make sure that everyone was aware of what the situation was, everyone was happy to proceed, and taking every bit of information we could from Kev and his team, and from the other information that we had externally as well. It was decided it was a sensible decision to make, and
Uh-huh.
it was only going to be a case of time would tell, and thankfully time has now proven that was the right thing. It was definitely a risk for us because we didn't know how it was going to go at the time. We I say we had all the information we did, but you never quite know how these things are going to pan out. But we're really grateful that things went the right way, and as I say, the film's now done better than we ever could have imagined. I mean, now I wish we'd have spent a lot more on it because we could have done, but again, you never know that.
Yeah,
Hindsight's a
yeah,
wonderful
yeah.
thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And what I've learned in recent years, sometimes you do need to take risks because if you don't take those risks, you could, you actually can miss out on quite a bit. And yeah, and as far as having Kevin's voice actually being played on set, I can imagine that that made it a lot easier for all the actors on set, just so in that way that they can react to it a lot better. I mean,
Yeah.
I kind of
Well,
feel like,
what we ended up doing actually was, so we had Kevin's voice and we edited it so it was as you're going to hear it in the film, pretty much. But what I thought it was really important to not just play a recording into my lead actress's ear, because the problem is then it's a recording, you know what's coming next, you know exactly how it's going to be delivered.
uh-huh,
And the problem is, I didn't want it taking away any of that spontaneity that as humans we have. Didn't want it to just be reacting to a recording. So what I ended up doing was she had that recording and she played it all over Christmas. She was listening to it, so she knew how Kevin was delivering it. But I said, we're going to get a double on set, a voice double, a stand-in, to be able to react slightly differently. And it made so much of a difference because he paused in different places that Kevin did and things like that. And it just made it more real. And it meant that her reactions were more in the moment and
uh-huh.
instantaneous than just responsive and reactive. And that, I think that was one of the best decisions I made on the film because it meant that she was much more in the moment, which is
Oh
so
yeah.
important for an actor. So then what it meant was in post production, we just literally whipped out the stand ins lines, put Kevin's back in that place, and we just got the best performances from both. So it was a different way of doing it, but I'm so glad I did it that way because I said it just meant that there was much more of a performance than there would have been just hearing it played back.
Oh yeah, certainly so. And I kind of feel like I kind of feel like that's something very similar to that. What a lot of films experience with, like, is when like they use CGI, and I mean, from I really good example is the Jurassic Park movies, and a lot of the older ones, yeah, there was CGI, but there also were animatronic dinosaurs,
Yeah.
and even the actors said that yeah, it's a lot easier to like interact and be scared of the dinosaurs if there's actually like a giant animatronic T-Rex right in front of you. But with a lot of the newer
Absolutely.
ones,
I wouldn't feel comfortable with that T Rex in front of my face.
yeah, exactly, those big old sharp teeth. But like,
Yeah.
yeah, like, oh, Mr. T-Rex, what sharp teeth that you have. And yeah, and with a lot of the newer Jurassic World movies, it's usually just tennis balls that they're staring at.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, what is scarier? An animatronic T-Rex that's staring at you, those gigantic teeth, and or a tennis ball.
Exactly, because actors, it's hard enough being an actor when you're having to pretend to be someone else in this pretend situation. So the more you can give to an actor to kind of make that real and have that feeling, because it gives it, even if it's just an extra 1% you get from doing that, I think it's worth it. There is, I think there would have been a difference between tennis balls and an animatronic T-Rex. That T-Rex isn't real, but I think still, even if it's just 1%, that's discernible to the audience. That extra level of fear. When that T-Rex puts its head through the top of the car, there's still a fear there. That's a big, heavy animatronic. You're going to
Yeah.
have more real fear there, regardless of whether it's living and breathing or not, than you would with tennis balls. So it's all about giving as much to the actors as you can to be able to make their job easier.
And it's funny that you mentioned that scene in Jurassic Park where the T-Rex breaks through that top glass of the car. So, from what I read, that was not intended in the original script, and those screams from the kids actually were genuine, like
Yeah,
screams of
they
like
sound
pure
real. Yeah,
terror.
I buy that absolutely.
Certainly, yeah, and I mean, even though that they knew it was an animatronic, but I mean, to have something similar to that break through a glass and it's like inches away from you and all you have
Yeah,
is just
it would
this
scare the hell
glass.
out of me, living or not. That would still scare the hell out of me.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So yeah, like oh my gosh, like talk about something that would make your heart rate go up.
Definitely.
Oh, definitely, yeah. And so out of all genres of film, do you have a particular favorite genre?
I personally love. I'd say that sci-fi is probably my favorite to watch, but that's it depends on what it is. There's so many things. I'm always more drawn to story, and that can mean that it doesn't matter what genre it is. If the story's there, that's what I kind of connect to, and I'm the same as a filmmaker as well, in that I've never once not read a script because of the genre or anything like that. I think that's a really dangerous thing to do, because you can find a story, and you only have to look at so many films that are almost hiding as another story. E.T. is a perfect one where
Uh-huh.
it's a love story, really, under the guise of a sci-fi film and things like that. So genres are really difficult to kind of nail down. You can look at so many horrors that are actually can be many other things. So there's all sorts of things there. I say I on the whole, as an audience member, I love sci-fi. I would love to do a big sci-fi epic at some point. But again, it's you got to get the story right, and that's
Mhm.
that's what I like to chase after the story.
Yeah, and I mean sci-fi films, and I mean they can be done as a low budget indie film. It's just that you just have to get you just have to get very creative, like about how you're gonna
Massively, yeah.
pull
I
those
mean,
off.
I think Duncan Jones did an amazing job with Moon. I think he did. I think that's one of the best contemporary low budget sci-fi films. He did that for Peanuts in comparison. But Moon still stands out as really really good. The same with Danny Boyle's Sunshine. I love Sunshine. It's so underrated, I think. But again, he did that with such a small indie budget, and still managed to make it work. You don't need all the millions in the world to make it work. It's about thinking outside the box a little bit and thinking, how can we tell the best story rather than just relying on visual effects.
Oh yeah, certainly so. And a lot of people like will complain about how a lot of movies like are all just visual effects and no story. But I'm like, well, and I mean, you voted with your wallet.
Yes, exactly. That's yeah. I do find that slightly frustrating as a filmmaker, in that I see so much of the time people saying, "Oh, more sequels and reboots and remakes," but they make more money than any others. You can't blame the studios for keep doing sequels when they
Yeah,
make more money than anything original. And I've been in that boat myself. You do something original, people don't know about it, so they don't really care about it. Whereas you do a sequel to something that they've already invested in, they're going to go and watch it. So you
yeah,
absolutely, I don't think you can blame the studios for that. The system works that way. It's always been the same with books as well. You only have to look at successful series of books. You try and do an original novel, it gets lost in the huge library of novels out there. Whereas do another 50 Shades and everyone's going to watch it, read it, and it's the same. You only have to look at superhero films or so many others. If you do something original, the danger of falling into to the Netflix abyss is huge. Whereas you do something that's got some IP attached, then it's the way to go. So yeah, it's unfortunate because we would love to tell more original stories, but we're not blessed with the budgets to be able to do that because they're too risky for investors, and I totally get that.
Yeah, exactly. Which is why that there's this current trend now, like with taking advantage of all these public domain properties, since that those are properties that they don't have to pay the rights for.
Yep.
Like with what happened to Winnie the Pooh, like when that went public domain, they and then turned that into a horror movie, and yeah, and it gained a
Yeah.
lot of attention. And even this year, Mickey Mouse went PD,
Yeah.
what did they do? Huh? They turned it into a horror movie.
Yeah, it's just about flipping the genre. That's what it is now. I'm waiting for some horror ones to for their copyrights to lapse so that they can be turned into nice bright movies.
Right?
That's what will happen with those.
Yeah, like
Michael Myers will be like a Disney movie.
oh my gosh! And imagine like for like a Nightmare on Elm Street. Imagine instead of the knives on his hands, like imagine if it's like spoons or oh my gosh. I think that that would be hilarious if they actually did that. It's
It would.
like
Don't tempt me. Don't tempt me.
yeah, definitely. And I mean, it would be funny. I mean, considering that we've had all of these innocent characters being turned completely upside down, it's like, okay, well, all these not so innocent characters and properties, if we turned them upside down too.
Yeah, I think it's inevitable. It's all about doing something different. And when a character that has been used in a certain way for so long has been used as that, it makes sense. Let's do something different with it because at this point in time, where creating original content using something that has got a fan base, that's gold dust. So using it in a fresh way is it was genius of the Winnie the Pooh gang to do that initially. Less so, I think, with the ones that have come on since, and the more and more of those characters that come out, we're going to see a slew of those, which is to be expected, and the novelty
Uh-huh.
will wear off quite quickly. But it'll be the same. You'll have characters used in totally different ways than they were originally set out. That will eventually happen. Inevitably, and someone will be the first. Like Winnie the Pooh, and they'll be the one that wins. It's about being able to do something different, and most importantly, do it first.
And I mean that's exactly why that Winnie the Pooh movie gained so much attention. It's because that it was so unusual, like for the character
Yeah,
and just for the property. Considering that it always was wholesome and innocent, and and yeah, and I mean it definitely sparked interest. And never once in my life did I ever think that we ever would get a Winnie the Pooh horror movie, but that's the public domain for you.
that's what we got now.
Yeah, and but yeah, and so I guess to all the people waiting for a Sonic the Hedgehog horror movie, well, that's not
You
gonna
have to wait a little
happen.
bit longer, yeah.
Yeah, I mean by then I'm gonna be dead. So
Yeah. That's going to be what, 2085? Must be.
yeah,
So
around
we've
there.
got a little while to wait on that one, yeah.
Yeah, definitely around there. I mean, unless if somebody's able to pull out those mental gymnastics and then somehow make copyright law not last 95 years.
Yeah. Yeah, good luck to them.
Yeah. good luck. You would need some really good lawyers. I mean, really,
Yeah,
like absolute top notch
yeah,
like lawyers for that. And good luck.
yeah. I'm not doing that.
Yeah, I don't think that I would want to either. So yeah, so would you have a movie that you would say is your all time like what would you say is your favorite movie?
uh, what in general or of
Yeah.
mine?
Uh yeah, like a favorite of yours.
Of mine. That's really difficult because I think as directors, we always strive for the best. And so inherently, your most recent is usually your best because you learn something new on every project you do, and you take all of that combined knowledge and experience and pour it into your latest one. And then you learn a whole load of new things from that one, which you'll use on the next one and the next one. So it's an ever evolving, evolution basically of craft and things like that. So I'd say Control as my latest is my best overall. I still struggle to watch any of it without seeing nothing but flaws really, but that's just the way that we are conditioned. And I I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. The day that I watch a film of mine and go, yeah, that's great, is the day I should probably stop because that's that you're probably not going to do better than that. So I do kind of like and appreciate that I have that way about me and that I can't that constant striving to improve. And so the one that we're working on now, I know is going to be so much better. It's going to blow everything before out the water because we've got the things that we haven't always had at the right time. Often in the past, we've had a great budget, but not so great script. Or we might have had a great script and not so much a good budget. Or we might have had great budget and script, but the cast wasn't necessarily the one that we wanted. There's all these things that kind of need to come together. Whereas on this one, we're in a really lucky position, touch wood, so far that everything is going really well. So unless something drastic changes, this should be the one that. Ask me again in a year and a half time, and I'm pretty sure I'll say this one.
All right, cool. And and I mean, as somebody who's also made movies, that's something that I relate to as well. I mean, when I go back and rewatch the first movie I made, there's a lot of moments where I cringe at it. I go, why did I do this or that? But hey, it. I feel like that you got it like spot on. It's something that you learn as time goes on.
Exactly. You wouldn't be where you are now if you didn't have that then. So you've got to appreciate those. You can't undo what you did because it was all part of the journey. As cringeworthy as some of it may be, and I'm certainly like that. I do nothing but apologize for my films most of the time. But really, I have them to thank for the position I'm in now. So, it is one of those that, people make up their own minds. There are so many directors through time who've made some awful films to begin with, which then retrospectively, years later, are given kind of a second appraisal and looked at through a different pair of glasses where you can go, actually, I see where that was the start of this journey. And so that's kind of how I like to think of mine, in that they are just the beginnings of the journey that I'm now well and truly on.
Yeah, and I mean, uh, funny you say that because I did mention the original Halloween earlier, and yeah, and when that film first came out, from what I heard in documentaries, it actually didn't do that very well, like with critics
Right?
and
Yep.
all that. But then
Hmm.
it wasn't until when Roger Ebert uh, gave his review on it,
Yep.
and afterwards, people and then went back and they re-looked at the original Halloween, and then and then afterwards, Halloween became what it is now.
Exactly, that's it. And there's so many examples of that where, initially on their first run, so many films have done really poorly. And my favorite movie of all time is Frank Capra's It's a Wonderful Life. Now, that was a film that famously wasn't well received to begin with. It failed at the box office to begin with, and now is often noted as one of the best films of all time. I think as there is such a tendency to take initial reactions and especially initial box office figures as somehow determining whether a film is good or not. And there's so many factors that go into it. It's the initial marketing run of a film is decided by the distributor, not by audiences, and certainly not by the filmmakers. So that can often have such a huge outcome on its initial box office. If it isn't given the right marketing run to begin with, it can fall off and die. And yet it can be years later when the right person can find it at the right time, start talking about it. And that's one of the benefits of the modern age of like social media and things like that, in that it doesn't rely quite so much on that, because people can talk more freely with each other around the world and say, have you seen this film? And it can make a difference. It can actually mean that films can be a success when they otherwise wouldn't have been previously. So it's there's so many factors that come into it. A good film isn't decided by its initial box office figures. There's so many aspects that come into play, really.
And a lot of it's about being released at just the right time. I mean, a year ago, I don't think anybody was anticipating like the whole Oppenheimer, like, and the whole Barbenheimer craze in general, like how they were two very different movies released on the same day. And even people who I heard, like, who live in LA, were saying that, yeah, people were expecting Barbie was going to be a hit, since it has the name value, but they weren't expecting it was going to make $1 billion.
No, not at all. And that was the thing. I know a lot of people in the studio system who were exactly the same. They realised they're in a very clever position in that they couldn't have been two more opposite films, really. And it was such a clever marketing strategy, knowing that people were likely to choose one or the other unless they did something different. And whichever marketing genius came up with the Barbenheimer thing that was conceived at Warner's, I think that was genius, because by doing that, it meant that people were doing like double bill days, and audiences that would never have watched a Barbie film were watching a Barbie film, and the same with Barbie audiences who would never even heard of Oppenheimer were watching a film about Oppenheimer. It was genius marketing that was done
Certainly.
so cleverly, and made both elevated both of their successes massively. And I
Oh,
think
definitely.
without that, both would have been at serious risk, because you know who would have ever really thought a Barbie film was going to do that well? Because it's a film about an action figure. Would a film about Action Man have the same draw? No. And the same with Oppenheimer in itself. Was that ever going to do quite as well as it did? It was never going to have the same audience draw as like The Dark Knight or things like that, because it's a totally different target audience. Clever marketing though brought it all together and completely changed everything.
Oh yeah, definitely, yeah. And Oppenheimer, like, so I do know that Deadpool and Wolverine actually recently just became the highest grossing R-rated movie of all time. But Oppenheimer, while it may not be the top grossing R-rated movie of all time, but it's definitely up there. And it's very rare for a movie like Oppenheimer, a like a biopic drama, to actually be that big of a hit during the summertime.
Absolutely, and bearing in mind it's a historical drama as well, and it hasn't got any big action sequences. The bomb sequence is, you could easily say it's underwhelming. It was intentional by Nolan to not overdo that, and I think that was a very clever way of doing it. But there's no big action sequences. There's no superheroes. There are so many things that modern audiences should, in theory, not want to see. Yet it worked, and it just showed the level of success a film can have, without those elements which are relied upon so heavily these days, especially when it comes to superheroes and things like that. We don't need Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man for a film to sell. Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, definitely, yeah. And there's even people out there who are saying that Robert's performance in Oppenheimer like is his best performance yet, and I can see why that they would say that is because there are people who will say that he plays the same character every time. But I mean, in Oppenheimer, though, it's a very, very, very different character from like when he was in Due Date and Iron Man. And
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I think Robert Downey Jr. is often, you know, typecast into the roles that he has, largely because of his work, especially when he kind of came back and did Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. But you only have to watch Chaplin, you know, Richard Attenborough's Chaplin, to see the range that Downey Jr. has got. I don't think anything will ever change my mind that that will be in the long term remembered as his greatest role of all time. He totally owned that role as Charlie Chaplin, you know, right the way through his life, from young Charlie
oh yeah.
all the way through to just before he died. That was one of the most amazing performances I've ever seen in any film. And you know, that's by the guy who did the very, let's be honest, two-dimensional Iron Man. You know, it's about what roles you're given, and you know, he will be remembered as Iron Man forever. But his best, it wasn't his best performance for sure. It was a very simple performance for him because, as he himself said, so much of that is just him. He got to go to work and be him every day, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, there are so many actors like that. You know, really, you hire an actor because they're a certain way often, or at least because they act a certain way. Johnny Depp's the same. You know, is often sold as a character actor that's got a broad range, but realistically, how much does he have to use that? You've got like Secret Window, where he's able to be a bit more him, or he's the kind of Jack Sparrow, Edward Scissorhands, Mad Hatter, who are all very quite similar, really. They're all, you know, you've only got those two sides, even though, you know, they're dressed up in a different costume. Ultimately, they're still the same person. And no matter how good an actor you are, you're still going to be quite similar. You know, you like you mentioned Jim Carrey earlier. Jim Carrey's always, you know, it's unmistakable Jim Carrey. You know, he's in a different costume because that's ultimately what people want to see. An audience doesn't want to go and see someone who's massively different. You know, if because you've warmed to a character in a certain way. You know, I was like oh heavens, what's his name? I don't know why his name just completely escaped me. From La La Land.
I
Um,
think you're talking about Ryan Gosling.
Ryan Gosling. Yeah, Ryan Gosling is so awkward, you know, in himself. He's very, very shy. He's not like the comedy character that he's been given a lot of recently, but he was one of them that found that comedy was more in his wheelhouse, and he did well at it, even though it kind of makes him uncomfortable. And so he keeps getting given these comedy roles. And, you know, again, you've just got to go where the work is. And it works really well for him. I think he's great in those roles, as awkward as they may make him, and make him feel that it works.
Uh huh. Oh yeah, definitely. And I mean, to that I say, what will work best, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and so people were saying like that the superhero genre like was starting to die off a year ago because so many of them bombed, except for Guardians 3 and Across the Spider Verse. And people were often saying that it was like the fatigue of superhero movies, which I was getting where people were coming from that. But Deadpool and Wolverine came out this year and it made $1 billion, and so I guess what are your thoughts on that? Like, do you feel like that it was people getting tired of superhero movies last year, or what? Hello? Oh no, I think he froze. Oh no. Yeah, he froze. Oh no. Okay, yeah. Yeah, and this is live. But yeah, I was curious what his opinion was going to be about all that with the fatigue of superhero movies. But yeah, I definitely like Gene. He seems to have a pretty good sense of humor and he's fun to talk to. Gonna be out there, and I'll be out there. Do, 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 do. There we go. Yeah, I was like, oh
Hey, sorry
shoot,
about that.
it froze. Oh, it's all right. That
I think
happens.
we had like a flash power cut. My Wi-Fi, everything went off for just a brief second, but it took my
Oh,
Wi-Fi a bit longer to boot back in.
oh, I'm sorry, but hey, and I mean, ultimately, what matters is that you're here now.
Yeah, I'm back.
So, anyways, what I was trying to ask before all that chaos went on, so a lot of superhero movies bombed last year, with the exception of Guardians 3 and Across the Spider Verse. People often were citing that it was fatigue of superhero movies, which, yeah, I get where people were coming from, but this year, Deadpool and Wolverine came out, made $1 billion. So what are your thoughts on all that?
I mean, I agree. I think it did get way too oversaturated, and the problem is they used up all the good superheroes very, very quickly. And I think the worst thing it could have done was Endgame, because as great as that was, that killed off so many characters that people were going back to see. Now, if they'd have carried on doing those, people would have carried on because they're invested in those characters. And that's what we as audience members love. We fall in love with these characters. We want to see more of them. That's proven with each new one that came out. However, when you do that and you're relying on new characters, that's where the problem is. Like you say, you got Guardians of the Galaxy 3, so we've got those existing characters that are pre-built there. People went to see it. Deadpool and Wolverine, which was specifically greenlit to try and combat superhero fatigue, has proven it again. It's all about giving audiences the characters that they like. Story, we can forgive. You only have to look at so many of the MCU's later stories as well, especially where you can think that wasn't a great story, but it may have had some great character moments. That is what audiences go back for. It's for the characters that we love to watch. So we can forgive the story not being so great. And that is exactly what's going on here. So it is a kind of catch-22 now where you have to keep bringing the characters back. And if you've killed the characters, like with Iron Man, you need to bring the actor back in a different role, which again is what they've done to try and keep audiences coming back. In that it doesn't matter if it's not the same character, it's still the same actor, and hoping that will work. Whether that works or not, time will tell. But you know, the reality is that when we absorb something we like, we just want more of it. That is just human nature. You whether it be movies or books or food or drink, when we like something, we want more of it, and
Yep,
we're going
yep.
to keep wanting more of it. So you take that away from us and put something new in front of us, we're going to kind of look down, what's that? And that's what happens, and that's why original content is so difficult to create in this industry at the moment, because audiences say they want it, but like you said earlier, you've got to show that, because the evidence doesn't say that. We create something original, we'll make a decent amount of money off it from the budget that we made Control for example. It's a huge amount of profit that it's made, but it's nothing compared to the profits that studio films make by having superheroes come back or other existing characters, which is why so many sequels get greenlit, because it's a way of bringing those back years later. Bad Boys and things like that, or as pleased as I am about it, Beetlejuice, or the Ghostbusters sequels. You bring those characters, those stories back, people will go and see them, whether they're very good or not. they'll still go and watch them. And so having that existing IP is what people are chasing for. We know that firsthand because when we did Control and we finished it, all we kept getting told by our investors, our distributors, everyone was saying, your next one needs to be remake, reboot, or sequel. It's got to use existing IP. And I didn't really want to do that because ultimately, if it's existing IP, you're either rebooting something that someone else has done, and nobody reboots something that was crap. Let's be honest. So you're going to be trying to reboot something that something was already successful. Doing a sequel, which is always tough. Like, what do you do? It's a really difficult situation to be in, and we're lucky in the situation that we're in now with the one that we're working on, that we found a very narrow and unusual gap that we can work with, but we've got kind of one shot of that, so it's difficult to know where it's going to go after that. What the future brings for original content. I just don't know at this point.
Yes, certainly. And and there will be those people who will say, "Oh, well, how dare they do a remake of that?" Like, or they'll say, "Oh, how dare they do a sequel? It's because it wrapped it up so well." It's like, well, money talks.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. And I'm just as guilty as everyone else. I will be there on opening day for Beetlejuice, and I don't really care what it's like either. I just want it. I want to see it. I want to consume it. I'm a consumer at the end of the day as well. I love movies, and so would on that day, am I more likely to watch that or something original? I'm absolutely more likely to watch that. I had every expectation that Ghostbusters Frozen Empire was going to be very disappointing compared to Afterlife. I still went and watched it, because we just want to know whether it's good or not. We just want to see what happens to those characters. We don't want to feel left out. We don't want to have a chapter, even if we were so satisfied at the ending that we were given. We still want to know if there's more. It's just the way we are. So people will always go back for that, and the studios know it. And as you say, money talks. And if you've got to choose, if you're running a studio and you've got the choice of something completely new, which is nothing but risk, or something that's existing, you're going to go with that one. If you've got the choice of another Avengers movie or something completely, if you were to do Field of Dreams nowadays, or any other original film, you got no chance. So it's difficult because the cost of movies is just going up and up and up and up as well. So you've got to mitigate the risk of a loss, and the losses they can cripple a studio, absolutely kill a studio off. One big flop now can be enough to kill a studio. It was one thing, in the 80s and even in the 90s where, a flop would be bad, but you could take the hit because of the production costs. Now, to produce it and market it well, like The Fall Guy, is a perfect example of a good film that people enjoyed, that people watched, but still didn't have enough people going back to watch it a second and third viewing. And that is what killed that film and really, really hurt the studio. So that says everything. Good movie, made a lot of money, still wasn't enough. Where do you go from there?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, and a lot of people even like were citing that, well, like about these budgets being too big for why so many movies bombed last year, like Indiana
Yeah.
Jones. That that was a movie that should not have bombed. It's because it's a well-known IP, but yet it
Yep.
bombed, and people were shocked that it bombed. And I mean, even I was shocked that it bombed. And people often cite how the movie that came out before wasn't well received, and I'm like, yeah, but I mean, even James Bond, I mean, that is a series where that's had movies that's somewhere better than the others, but yet they were able to recover on the financial aspect
Yeah, I
afterwards.
think the
So
difference with Bond is that they were able to keep it fresh. When they started to go downhill, they could put a new Bond in. They could
yeah, fair.
reinvigorate the series. Whereas the problem is with Indiana Jones, you've got nowhere to go. If it does bad, unless you're going to create a new Indiana Jones, but nobody's going to like that. Let's be honest. There
Yeah,
aren't many series like James Bond where you can get away and people actually look forward to the next James Bond. I mean, you only have to look at the audience reaction to Captain America and things like that. People don't like change for the most part. James Bond is one of the very few instances, the unusual instances, where people look forward to it. And I can't explain why either. I don't like change when it comes to characters I like and franchises I like. Yeah, I'm just like everyone else. When it comes to James Bond, I'm like, yeah, I can't wait to see who's next. I don't know why. It just is.
Yeah, and about the change thing, I mean, you even could argue that that's one of the reasons why Deadpool and Wolverine was such a hit. It's because that Hugh Jackman finally wore the iconic suit, and a lot of people, and a lot of people recognize Wolverine because of that costume, and
Yeah,
so it was something that people were already aware of, and especially by the and especially being worn by the iconic actor.
exactly. That's it. You know, you put those magic ingredients together, people just want to see that, even if it's just for that moment. You know, you wait till the end of Ghostbusters Afterlife to see Venkman come back, you know, because you want to see that and knowing that it's going to happen. Absolutely. You know, it gets to a point where it doesn't matter. You know, as I say, I know I've mentioned it a couple of times, but one of the things I'm most looking forward to about Beetlejuice is just seeing Michael Keaton coming back as that character. Seeing the first trailers was just so exciting, you know. So it doesn't matter, and that what a position to be in, where it doesn't matter what the film is like, you know that people are going to watch it. Like it's a strange situation, and often the risk of it being slaughtered by critics gets higher in that instance, but it doesn't really make a difference. You know, it's is often a huge disparity between films that are well received critically and do well at the box office because people want to see what they want to see, and it doesn't matter if it. You know, sometimes it can be films that everyone expected to do well that bomb, other ones that people didn't expect that can kind of come out of nowhere. You know, with the day that someone figures out exactly what audience wants, they'll become the richest person in the world.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so yeah, and so yeah. So, are there any projects of yours coming out that you would want that you would want my audience to be aware of?
At the moment, as I say, we're eyes deep in development on this project that we're working on at the moment. I, I I can't say too much about it at the moment. I can say that the title is Nightmares,
Awesome,
and that we're shooting in London and Los Angeles the early part of next year, 2025.
awesome.
We go out in 2 weeks to do some preliminary shoots and things like that at the studios. But yeah, it's one that has to be kind of kept under wraps more than anything I've worked on in the past because it's got some connection to existing IP without being a reboot, remake, or sequel. So
Interesting.
yeah, somehow we've managed to get the right ingredients together at the right time on that one. So yeah, it's a really interesting project. I can't wait to get started. Yeah, I'm just itching to get out into the sunshine and start work in a couple of weeks.
Huh. Well, that's very, very interesting. And so it's filming next year, but do you know when it's gonna be released?
It's probably going to be, I expect October 2025. I'm almost certain that that's when it'll be released.
Awesome. And well, and I mean, as soon as that comes out, I definitely will be sure to check it out.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Of course. Well, I think I'm gonna wrap this up now, and yeah, and so to all my followers, definitely be sure to follow Gene on his Instagram page, and yeah, and be sure to follow him like on any other forms of social media, and be sure to check out his films.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, of course. Well, it certainly was an honor. So
And you, yeah, thank you very much for having me on.
yeah, yeah, of course. Yeah, you have a fantastic day.
And you. See you later.
All righty. See you later.
Bye bye.
See you.